Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria QK.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. Let's get into this week's 6 shocking stories.
All right, so our first one's out of South Africa. I would advise anybody that's eating right now to either pause and listen to this later or just go into it a little hesitant. So this woman went to this local shop. She bought a loaf of whole wheat bread. So she said she ate about half of it. Everything seemed fine. Then one morning she went to go take it out to make some toast and noticed, something was really unusual about it.
Yeah, and when she further examined the slices of bread, she saw full cross sections of a rat that was embedded in the bread.
So this rat was baked into the bread, the full body of the rat. So when you're looking at the loaf, you just see, it was sliced with an industrial slicer. So you just see its organs sliced perfectly in half and its hair baked into the top of the loaf. And to think that she ate most of that loaf of bread and didn't see that for a while is so disgusting.
It is. It really is. When I look at it, it just looks like work. That's exactly what we would do with anything, is just it looks like when you put a piece of colon through the processor and you do histology on it and make microscope slides. It's kind of the same theory. It's just so disturbing looking. You could see all of the anatomy slices of the GI system in one slice. You see hair in one slice. You could see bone. It's so gross. It seriously is gross.
I was eating breakfast while I was writing notes for this episode and had to stop for a minute because the pictures are so, and yes, there are pictures and they are so disgusting. She said she sent the pictures to her friend and was like, what the fuck? And they were like, that's obviously a rat. She was totally in denial about it because she just couldn't believe it.
There's absolutely no doubt that that's what it is. It can't be oh, maybe it was, I don't know, some burnt thing from the machine or something. No, it's a full-on anatomy lesson. It's so disturbing.
Not only that, the top of it is, I imagine this loaf pan and batter and how this rat is just laying perfectly in the batter on the top, gets baked, and its hair, its fur, is just on the top of the loaf. It is so disgusting.
What a terrible life for the rat.
So she went to the store where she bought it from and complained, and they're like, this isn't our problem. You're going to have to contact the manufacturer of the bread, which was PepsiCo, weirdly enough. I guess they owned whatever brand made this bread. So, they said they were aware of it, and it was an isolated incident, and they were doing an investigation. Can you imagine, those calls you get from Wegmans sometimes saying there's a recall on something you bought? Can you imagine finding out that your recall was because rat was baked in your batch of bread that you already ate?
I love that the company said that the bread did not, quote, meet their stringent standards. You're like, oh yeah, you think?
I don't think that has anything to do with standards. I would just hope you don't bake rodents or your facility is clean.
Oh my God. It's so gross. The wet hair and everything. Ugh.
Then did you see the story later in the article about the guy who got a wrap from a local bakery? I think it was in Australia. And as he was biting into it, he noticed something was really chewy. And then he opened it up and the dead rat was also in the wrap.
I think that might be one of these two situations, could be what finally causes me to lose weight and maintain a good weight at all times. I just wouldn't be able to eat the same. Or at least out ever.
No, I mean, that guy in that case said that he hasn't been able to fully enjoy a meal since. I would imagine you don't eat anything unless you could see all the parts of it.
Well, this next story too is similar, right?
Yeah. So this one's from 2018, but this couple in Indianapolis, they had gone to Little Caesars and picked up a pizza. So they're driving away and the girlfriend opens the box of pizza and is looking at it and notices these little black specks on the pizza. And as she lifts up the bottom of the crust, she realized that mouse shit is baked into the pizza.
I don't know how she noticed that, because when you look at the slice of it, it's all at the bottom and it's definitely mouse poop. There's no doubt that that's what it is. It looks like little black seeds embedded in the bottom of the crust. But when do you ever look at the bottom of the pizza?
Maybe some of it was in the top of the crust and then she just flipped it upon further inspection. I think if I just saw a little bit of it, my mind just had to be like, oh, that must be burnt little bits from the oven,
That's
right?
what I would think too. Exactly.
But it was 100% mouse shit. There's nothing else it could be, especially when you look at the pictures of this. So they go back to the Little Caesars and they're like, what the fuck? Where did all this mouse poop come from? They had no idea where it came from. So they called the police and the health department. They immediately got shut down and got their license suspended. And the health department was saying that they had 7 violations the year before for rodent-related activities. So this is so gross.
I just heard that they closed down a Five Below in Center City because there were rats that were eating through the bags of food there or something, that they closed it down for a couple days. But when I just went by it the other day, it looked like it was open.
Well, this Little Caesars did reopen afterwards, and I looked it up, and it's still open today. So it was only a temporary suspension of the license, but
Oh, it's so gross.
it is gross. And I mean, I think I've said this on another episode, like it's just ignorant to not understand that a majority of restaurants are going to have issues with attracting mice and stuff, but it's about how the restaurant is taking care of it and being proactive about cleaning. And you definitely can't bake a rat into a loaf of bread. You certainly can't make an entire pizza and have that much mouse shit baked into one pie. So imagine every other pizza that got picked up that day.
Could you imagine how many things happen that that actually get caught? Like a mouse or a rat getting baked into bread, but the company, like, you know, the people that are actually checking the stuff see it and they're like, oh my God, thank God that didn't get out to the public. Like, there's probably people that work in factories that are like, you have no idea, you know, what we catch. Because there's like QA, QC stuff, like they're supposed to be checking to make sure things like that don't happen. And I'm sure things get caught all the time, you know?
And not everything makes the news. I mean, I'm sure things of this level are happening every day in parts of the world, you know, but not everything's making the news like this. The rat thing, I could see, I could live in a world where I understand that mouse poop is probably regularly entering food and people aren't aware of it, but the rat thing is totally unacceptable. I just can't imagine that.
I don't want to ever have anything foreign in my food. I've heard
No.
of like Band-Aids, like, ugh. It's so nasty.
You know what's really common to pop up in foods is parts of gloves, because when people are wearing gloves to do food prep, sometimes
Yeah.
they'll like cut themselves or cut pieces of the glove or something, and
Ew.
those also often end up in dips or like dressings, stuff like that. So that's pretty disgusting.
All right, this is gross.
All right. This 29-year-old male presented to the emergency room with stomach pain, rapid heartbeat, rapid breathing. So upon exam, doctors discovered something incredibly unusual, and I'm sure if you've been listening to us for a while, you could probably see where this one's going.
So apparently this guy was high on GHB, which is gamma hydroxybutyric acid, which is also known as the date rape drug. So it gives you a euphoric feeling, but also amnesia. So you don't remember if you're having sex or doing anything that night. And him and his boyfriend apparently were taking this drug and high, and they decided that it would be a good idea to stick 15 hard-boiled eggs up his ass. No shell. They were out of the shell.
So I do imagine because of how they move, they probably went up pretty easy. So they just kept sticking them up there. But do they disintegrate up there? Or like, how do they come out?
No, they didn't. What happened was they went up there and they caused a perforation. That's why he was having extreme abdominal pain. So they pushed them in to the point where the rectal wall ruptured and he was having poop inside of his rectum and colon leaking into his abdominal cavity. And they were concerned that he was having sepsis, actually, or a systemic infection because of the poop leaking inside of his body. So they had to do emergency surgery. They said that they took the eggs out. They cleaned it up as best as they could, because it's like legit probably like an egg salad at that point. Like if you push on a soft boiled egg, right, and you're just shoving them up a hole, like eventually they're all going to start breaking, and like that real interesting for the doctors to see that.
Yeah, and then after this, he got admitted to the ICU. Can you imagine explaining to people in your life, like, oh, why were you in the ICU? Because I stuffed all these eggs up my butt.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, like, if they were just doing it because sometimes it's like an ecstasy type thing. Like maybe, I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, he seemed to know that this happened to him because, like we were saying, that he was high on this drug that could cause amnesia. You're like, are you sure you like agreed to this? It doesn't seem like a great idea, but I guess when you're on drugs, you're not making the best decisions.
Yeah, when you just said it was a date rape drug, I'm like, so he willingly took this, or what happened here? Because
I mean, people do. I don't know why you would want to do it and not remember it, but maybe, I don't know. Like, people like all sorts of things, like romance bookstores and weird shit.
By the way, the people are agreeing with you so far, which I can't believe.
Really? Wait.
Yeah.
I need to hear about this.
Yeah, we have a couple comments so far of people saying that they do think it is weird and they would never do something like that.
Okay, thank
read a
you.
romance.
Thank you. And like, people aren't just agreeing with me to agree with me because they love disagreeing with me, actually. So come on, like, it's true. It's really like the weirdest shit.
I
still can't get over
because
it.
most people I know read them. So I find it surprising that most people are agreeing with you. So far,
All
see.
your friends are losers too. What do you want me to say?
Thanks. This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, the new year is here. The holidays are over, and we know it's like cold as shit out if you live near us, and there is nothing to do in January and February. So why not join The Gross Room and meet a bunch of cool people and learn some awesome stuff? And especially if you love this podcast, you're going to love the content in The Gross Room.
Yeah, head over to thegrossroom.com for more info and to sign up today. All right, this next story is about this 22-year-old guy. He went to the emergency room with abdominal pain and rectal bleeding, but this is not like our friend from the story before, where we know, people are sticking things up their butt and causing these problems themselves. So he had said earlier in the day he had similar pain, but he had a non-bloody stool. But upon exam, everything looked normal. So what's the deal with this?
So if you ever go to the emergency room and you're saying that you're bleeding when you're going to the bathroom, bright red blood, that's like very alarming. It's called hematochezia. And it's something of concern because you could have bleeding hemorrhoids, or you could have a tumor or something. So or you could have, especially in a younger person, like ulcerative colitis or something like that. So they just want to make sure that not only do you not have this underlying disease process, but are you anemic? Are you losing too much blood? So they take blood work, and they look for all sorts of different things, but they look for anemia, bleeding, infection, all of that. And all of his blood work was fine. So what was it then? What caused him to have this episode of like shitting bright red blood and abdominal pain and stuff like that? So they say, well, and this is a thing that a lot of people don't understand with the emergency room, is like they kind of, even if you do have an underlying health thing, they kind of don't really care. They just want to make sure that you're stable and send you home, because that's their job, just to make sure you're not going to die or become seriously ill. And so they were like, you seem fine now, your blood work's fine, so why don't you follow up tomorrow with a GI doctor? So the guy goes to a GI doctor, and he so happened to take a picture of the poop and shows the doctor this picture, which we actually have the picture of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor's like a very well in tune GI doctor will always know, like, God, what did you eat? Tell me what you ate, right? Like, it's just like, they're used to this, right? So the guy says, well, before that happened, I ate in a whole entire extra large bag of Cheetos. What were they called?
Flaming hot Cheetos.
Flaming hot Cheetos, right? So then the doctor was probably like, all right, bye. This is your problem, right? So yeah, and that turns out what happened. So you're having not only just eating a large volume of stuff, but it's also spicy. So that could account for the abdominal pain. But it has maltodextrin in it, which is like, we always say that if you have a lot of that artificial sugar stuff like that it could give you diarrhea. Like if you eat a lot of sugar-free candies, or anything like that. You really shouldn't eat anything in a large volume, even the sugar-free the coffee syrup, any of it.
Oh, yeah.
It seriously acts like a laxative, and it gives you like these extreme abdominal cramps, and it could give you diarrhea too. So that powder that they put on top of the Cheetos to give it that fiery flavor has that stuff in it. So if you have a handful, like you're supposed to a normal serving size, you might not notice it. It also has MSG in it, which can also cause those types of symptoms in people if they're sensitive to it. But when you eat 20 servings of it at one time, that's exactly what happened. So that's what gave him the diarrhea, and then the also eating that much of it gave the food coloring caused it to look like it was blood. But this GI doctor that is just used to seeing bloody stool for a living was like, yeah, that looks a little bit too orange to me. Like this is food dye, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of hilarious, honestly. Like it's good that it ended up being nothing. And this happens. This has happened to me where I went to the bathroom and peed, and my pee is red, right? And I'm like, oh my God, why do I have hematuria? I'm bleeding from my bladder or something. And then I sit there and think about it for a second, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, I had beets yesterday or something, like, because beets cause your urine to turn red. It's called beetaturia, actually. It's like a thing. But there's that moment where it scares the shit out of you when you look in your toilet and you're like, oh my God, I just peed blood. Like something terrible is wrong right now. So the food coloring thing is that's why when you get a colonoscopy and stuff, they tell you not to have like Jello or anything, because the red dye in the Jello could make it look like blood when it's not really blood, you know?
I think this happens a lot. I don't think people are used to what food dye could do. I remember one year I made a Star Wars cake for one of my friends that had a lot of black food dye in it. And a couple days later, my friend's girlfriend was like, oh my God, my brother was freaking out because his shit was black. And he didn't know what happened. And then we realized the next day it was from the cake. It happened to all of us.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the worst too, because you don't really think about it. This guy got diarrhea, not too long after. I mean, obviously it had to travel through his whole GI tract, and sometimes you just forget about it, And that happened to Lillian once. I made green cupcakes for her at school. Because her birthday's on St. Patrick's Day. I put like a whole container of green in to make them like extra green. And the kids, Lillian came home and was like, oh my God, my poop's green. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I look at it and I was like, oh shit, that's like really green. It's like like Play-Doh green poop, But I was talking to one of the moms later who didn't realize that her kid had one of these cupcakes at school during the day, And she was just like, oh my God, I was so scared. I called the doctor. I felt so bad. And then they were like, oh, it's probably some kind of food dye. And then they realized that. But I just thought I thought it was hilarious. Like, imagine not even knowing that your kid ate something like that and just being like, why is their poop this color?
I mean, this just happened to me recently because one of my favorite cereals ever is like Captain Crunch, the all berries one. So of course,
shit
like
is so terrible.
Like a total gavo, and I ate the entire box in like 3 days. When we were away, I'm like, why is my poop such a weird color? And I realized it was because I ate like this whole box of like red and blue weird colored cereal.
Well, it's you know what though, your poop color it can tell you a lot about the state of your health. So it's something like you should look at, and definitely you should be alarmed if you see that you have blood. If you had blood or you thought you had blood, like he did the right thing, especially with the pain and everything. Like it just like luckily it turned out to be nothing. I just think it's funny. Like at the ER, they're like, I don't know, you seem fine to me. Like.
Do you want to tell the story about Pop-Up having kind of the opposite?
Oh, this is actually, all right, this is a good story. So all good stories involve my dad. So he's like, we were talking about in a previous episode, how he's kind of like anti going to the hospital and getting something checked out if he's having an issue. And so one day my mom comes home, and he had come home from work early. This is a man that like, I don't know that he's ever called out a day sick in his life. Okay. So he was a mechanic. He worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. And my mom comes home and he's like, I came home from work. I took a half day. I'm tired. And my mom, like, so automatically all of us are like, he's dying because something is terribly wrong, right? So then she's like, are you sure you're okay? He's like, yeah, I just feel really tired. Okay. So he goes to the bathroom and he's like, I don't know. I kind of want you to look at my poop because it's a little red. I know that we had these Chinese spare ribs last night and it's probably from that, but just take a look at it, right? So my mom's like, okay. So she goes in the bathroom and she says she looks in the toilet and it looks like someone poured an entire bucket of blood in the toilet. Like it was filled up with like pure, thick blood. So she takes him to the hospital. He didn't want to go. She takes him to the hospital. He's like severely anemic. His hemoglobin was 5. For a dude, it's supposed to be like 12.
Okay.
Right? Or 13, like a higher number, definitely higher number. 5 is borderline, like you need a transfusion. It's that low, right? So that's explains why he was so tired. And here he had like hemorrhoids that were bleeding or something, or diverticulitis or something. I don't know what he had. I think he had both, whatever. He didn't even need to really get treatment on it. Like it stopped and that was the end of it kind of thing. But he just was almost blew that off, which is amazing.
Yeah, total opposite of this story. At least the person in the story was proactive and got it checked out, and it did end up being food. Whereas Pop-Up's like, it must have been the ribs. I don't know what to say.
We're just like, yeah, like that would make it look like that, Dad. So, oh my God.
All right, this next story is about this guy who was born with this rare tumor in his eyeball. So as he got older, the tumor continued to grow in size, and even weirder, it started to grow some hairs.
So this is a really rare tumor. I've never seen one of these in real life, but the pictures of them are so disturbing because it looks like this little soft yellow nodule that's right on someone's eyeball. And like Maria said, it could grow hair. So they're benign tumors. They're called limbal dermoid tumors. They're benign, which means they're not cancer. But like we talk about all the time, just because it's not cancerous doesn't mean that it's not going to be hell for you. I mean, imagine having a nodule on your eyeball and every time you blink, it like rubbing your eyelid and stuff like that. So especially if there was like little hairs on the end of it. Plus cosmetically, it looks a little awkward and they could actually change the shape of your eyeball and give you an astigmatism and all these things. So they obviously it's your eye and they don't want to mess around with it unless they have to, but they'll do surgery on it if it gets that bad. But it's rare, at least. It's just really, the picture of it's just kind of awkward looking, you know?
I just imagine it's so uncomfortable.
I know. Eye things are the worst, really.
So do you have to trim the little hairs? Because they're like coming out of the center of the eyeball.
But you're born with this mass, you know? It's kind of like a cystic tumor. So I suppose you're used to it if it's there, you know? It's I don't know how, but it would drive me absolutely crazy just to see it. I can't imagine seeing someone in real life that has one too. It's pretty interesting, but they're seen in syndrome. So sometimes certain tumors could be seen if you have a certain kind of syndrome. So if that particular syndrome runs in your family, then these eye lesions can run in your family too. But never seen one in real life.
All right, let's wrap up with one of the most disturbing cases we've ever covered. So in 2009 in Russia, all these parents of deceased children were visiting their graves only to realize the graves had been desecrated. For about 2 years, police couldn't figure out who was doing it until someone reported a man who was defacing the graves of deceased Muslim people. So they arrest this guy named Anatoly Mosin, and when they went to search his apartment, they found something even more horrific than they could have even imagined.
I can't even describe this case. This is the craziest true crime story probably of all time that he didn't kill anybody, this guy. So let's get that straight, but probably one of the most disturbing things. So when they went to his house, they found all of these dolls around the house that were posed in different outfits all around, but they weren't dolls. They were actually dead, mummified children that he had dug up out of the graves and was dressing them up and like playing house with these dolls.
Yeah, and he was like putting music boxes in them so when they would be like touched or moved, they would make noise. And Some of them even had little pieces of their gravestone with their name inside of their bodies, and it was just so disturbing. They're all over this guy's apartment, and you must think, like, oh, nobody must have known he was doing this, but he lived with his parents, so people were seeing these dolls.
Yeah, and his parents, the whole entire thing is just so. I mean, this guy's mentally ill, so you could see with him. The more disturbing part is that that his parents are not mentally ill, and they just said like, oh, we knew about the dolls, but we just thought, he sewed buttons in their eyes and would watch TV and cartoons with them and like took care of them as if they were live children. And the parents didn't think that was weird that he had dolls. He was a grown man doing that. They used to leave him for months at a time and go to their vacation house. So, I mean, that's that. And then also the neighbors said that it smelled terrible in there. So obviously you have dead bodies in your house. Yeah. So I don't really know what to say. He was very, I don't know if Maria mentioned this, but he was a very intelligent man.
He was
Very
a very
educated.
highly regarded scholar. He spoke, 13 languages?
13 languages. He had 60,000 books in his possession on death and funerals, cremation, all that stuff. So he knew when he removed these bodies from the grave, he knew how to naturally mummify them, or not even really natural, but he tried to accelerate it by putting them in a certain environment, and he was putting chemicals on them of baking soda and salt to dry out their skin to make the environment so bacteria couldn't grow to cause the mummification. He would store the bodies in a cold place until they were completely mummified, and then he would bring them back to his house once they were mummified. And oddly enough, a mummified person may not smell, it will definitely not smell as bad as a person that was decomposing out in nature and had bacterial growth, because that would just smell worse. But there would definitely be a smell to it. So that's what weren't they saying it smelled like an old basement or something?
Yeah, it just smelled like musty or
like musty.
like
Yeah,
weird.
Like it had like a weird smell that the neighbors would say. And he would bring them back, and these dolls are so disturbing looking. Sometimes he put wax and makeup on their faces. He would dress them in like little girls' clothes and like hung out with them and talked to them, had relationships with them, but nothing out of all of the investigation and stuff, it doesn't appear that there was anything sexual. There was no inappropriateness. Even one of the fathers of one of these victims said that, which was weird too, said that he almost wasn't even mad about it because he was treating his daughter better than he treated his daughter when she was alive.
I couldn't believe that. I mean, as disturbing as this case is, he didn't kill any of them, so they originally could only charge him with desecrating the graves, and then he was eventually found unfit for trial, so he was put in a psychiatric hospital or facility to live there. And I guess the latest update was from 2022, where he's been trying to get out, and some of the doctors don't think there's any medical reasons to continue holding him, but obviously the parents of these children don't want him to ever get out. And I don't think somebody that did this to 29 girls is going to get out and not try to do something like this again.
Hasn't he said that he's going to do it again? So this is the thing, like, he's schizophrenic. He's been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he's having with paranoia, and he's hallucinating, and he's thinking that he really believes, and he's having these delusions. He really believes that he's taking these children out of the grave to give them a better life, and he believes he's giving them a better life, and like he believes that because he's schizophrenic, right? So I don't know if once you treat a person with that, like, he shouldn't in theory be having those things anymore if his schizophrenia is being treated, but I don't really know how that works, because this happens in so many cases all over the place.
Well, another concerning component of this is that, so he basically, they think he's been a virgin his whole life, right? So there was no sexual component to this. But this 25-year-old woman had been following his legal proceedings, and the last we heard in 2022, he was possibly going to marry this woman. So let's say if he does get out, or maybe they're in constant communication, what if she starts doing this too? Or helping him do it?
There is always a woman that wants to marry some dude in jail.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of outrageous how many stories we talk about all the time with these women that are just like
We have to do an external exam on this. There's just too many stories.
I just wish I wish we could interview someone that actually like dated someone in jail, like a higher profile person or somebody that did something really crazy, and see like what they were thinking when they were dating that person. I'm just really
I don't know
curious
I
about
want to
it.
be on someone's radar like that.
Sounds like a good romance novel.
I don't think so, but now you're an expert on the romance novels all of a sudden. All right, well, thank you guys so much. If you have a shocking story, please submit it to stories@motherknowsdeath.com, and we will see you next week with some more news stories.
See ya. Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.